Good morning, good morning. Just finishing getting set up here. So the last that I just checked right before I started the live, and it looks like the wreaths won. Just barely. So we're going to be doing the floral wreaths today, not wreaths. Happy Saturday. Yes, happy Saturday. For anybody in the US, are you doing anything fun with the long weekend? We have a holiday this weekend, or well, Monday, here in the US. I'm going to start taping these down. This one is actually, since it's not super saturated, this is a pretty good one to do in a sketchbook if you want to do it that way. But you can, of course, do these on little pieces of paper. I'm going to be playing with some washi tape today because, I don't know, they just want some extra prettiness, I suppose. Alright, so I've got a few different sizes here, and your wreaths are really going to depend on the size of your brush, as well as the size of whatever you have that's round, that you can make some marks with. So you might want to grab some tape, grab the bottom of a glass or something. Just started watercolor your first class? Well, welcome! So glad to have you. You're finishing working on your chicken coop? Oh, cool. How many chickens do you have? And are they new? Are you new to chicken keeping, or are you just making them a new fun home? We just got a, they redid one of our parks near where I live, and I don't know if the weather is going to cooperate, but I'm hoping it does, because they included a river float in there, and I really want to take our paddle boards. We haven't used them in over a year. I want to take our paddle boards on it. Of course, every Saturday we can get together and paint a little bit together. $23. Wow. That's a... You must always have fresh eggs. I'm sorry to hear that you lost one, though. I've never had chickens. Growing up, for a while, my mom had a turkey coop, and the foxes kept getting them. So, if anybody is new today, my name is Lacey, and I do different types of artwork and craft type things. But right now we've been focused on doing some watercolor stuff, and I've got a ton of resources on my page for different things. Hopefully, someday soon, TikTok is going to give me the ability to make playlists so that we can actually group them together. But every Saturday we get together and we paint something. Sometimes we do the same things as previous times in a little different way. And sometimes we do something new. So today we are going to be doing these kind of floral wreaths. Also, just a few other pieces of information. If you want to, after the class, it always makes my day. If you want to actually send me pictures of what you did, you can send them to Lacey Walker Art or Rebel Unicorn Crafts. I've got both on Instagram. I don't post much there, but it's an easy way for me to receive pictures, so there's that. And then obviously not required at all, because I do these every week for free. But if you do want to give me a tip, I've got a Venmo, which is at Rebel Unicorn Crafts, and please don't feel pressured to do that. All right, there is our administrative stuff. So, I've taped down some things. This can also be done in a sketchbook. Other things about setup, I recommend having 2 cups of water. One that you can keep as fresh water to help transfer, or if you've got a spray bottle, that works too, but I usually use a pipette. I've got 2 brushes here. They both say they're size 10, but this one to me is more like a size 12 and a size 10. They're both just round brushes. That's what I'm going to be using today. You're still a watcher? Hey, sometimes you gotta just observe for a little bit. And then I'm going to be using a dry palette today. You can definitely do this with tubes, but if you are doing a dry palette, you might want to just refresh your colors. I'm just going to put some water on top of all of these so that they're ready. No eggs yet, they're still young. Well, soon I'm sure you'll have lots of eggs. How long does it take for chickens to make eggs? So a few things that I actually didn't mention in my supply list for this week, because I actually didn't know what we were going to be doing, but I should have, is you're probably going to want some sort of a pencil and some sort of an eraser for this one. And this is actually going to be, I need to make a video on this, but this will be a good lesson in sketching and then removing so you don't have marks. So the first thing we want to do is actually give ourselves a little guide. So I'm just going to find some things around my studio here that are circles or circular. And these don't have to be perfect, but I'm going to put this here. And you want to make sure you give yourself about an inch on either side. So I'm going to use the inside of this for my wreath because the inside mark will have enough room on the outside. And I'm using a light pencil. I could actually use an even lighter one, but I just very lightly made that mark here. So lightly that you're going to probably have a little bit of a hard time seeing it. And that's actually kind of good because the lighter you can make it, the easier it'll be able to come up, as well as you won't be able to see it as much. But then I will also take a kneaded eraser. Any sort of eraser will work, but I like the kneaded erasers because I can kind of just push and pick up a little bit of that pigment. Just like this. 18 to 20 weeks old. Oh, so you're getting kind of close. Kind of close to having eggs. Our town actually allows chickens in most of the neighborhoods. I don't have chickens though. I'm not sure I have enough time to take care of them. Alright, so you probably almost can't see this at all. I have taken up almost all of that graphite there, but I can still see the general guideline. And I'm going to do that for these other ones because I'll probably work on a few of these. You can work on one, you can work on two, whatever you want to do. But I can demonstrate a few different things if I do a couple of them. So I'm going to use this other size tape for this one, and I'm going to do the outside part of this. If you're really good at hand lettering, these are fun to write a little message, or they're really cute to put on a card. You can actually buy watercolor paper cards that are already pre-made to the size and come with envelopes if you wanted to send greeting cards with your artwork on them. They're kind of fun to do. And let's find something else that is round and a little bit bigger. That's about the same size. I don't have anything that looks like the right size, so maybe what I'll do is put this straight up so it'll go a little bit bigger around it. These don't need to be perfect, but it is kind of nice. Sometimes you get a little lost if you don't make a little guide. Whoops. There we go. That's not a great one, but that's okay. All right. Yes, so that's the other thing is I do post these at usually within a day or two after the live on my YouTube channel, which is Rebel Unicorn Crafts. All right, I've got my circles here, and I always tape mine to something so that I can hold it at an angle that's comfortable for me, and if you want to do that, I recommend it as well. Let's move some of these a little out of the way so you can see. I've got my rag down here, and as a quick reminder, if you can and you have the space for it, put all of your wet supplies on the side of your dominant hand. It will help you kind of keep everything together and you'll be less likely to drip onto the painting you're working on. So the first thing I want to do is actually carve out some space for some of these little roses. So that's the first thing we're going to paint. And I want to add a little bit of fresh water just somewhere on my palette. We don't have to mix up a ton of colors for these. I'm going to use my littler brush, which is this littler size 10. And you might also want some scrap paper to test your colors on. I've got this piece here I can use. I'm going to grab some of this magenta. This is the quinacridone magenta. And let's see what color that is. I love this color. Ooh, that's pretty. All right, so what we want to do is just decide a few things. One, this first one, what we're going to do is when you make a wreath, you can make it in two different ways. You can either do one where they all follow the same line, where they all go around in the same way. Or you can do something like this where you have a main focal point and then the leaves and things branch out in different directions until they meet, or you can leave a little gap on them. Yeah, it is magic, that quinacridone magenta. And as you can see here on this painting, you can still see some of my pencil marks. So you do want to try to get rid of those as much as you can. Leave them to where you can see it, but if you can, try to remove as much of it as you can. The other thing you can do is actually make these little sketch marks with watercolor pencil, and then they'll disappear completely. Yes, so I am using Canson 140-pound paper. But these ones, if you're in a sketchbook that's slightly less, like 110-pound, these will probably work fine for this too because there's a little less water involved, so there won't be quite as much warping as normal. All right, so we've got our first pink color. I'm going to put a little bit of water next to this because I want to vary how much pigment is in this. I'm going to start by loading my brush up with this, and I'm just going to make a decision. So for this one, I want to do a focal point one. So I want my roses to be about here for my main part, and then all the leaves are going to branch out from this direction and then this direction. So for the rose, I'm taking my round brush and I'm just going to make a little C shape, just like that. And then I'm going to make a little C shape that goes in it, and try to keep some white space in between these. I'm going to grab a little bit of water and overlap, and the more white space you can preserve, the better this will end up looking. Okay, that's going to be my first little rose there. We're going to do a couple layers on this. So let's actually, I'm going to grab a little bit of, I think this is just called red, just to give it a little bit different color in here. Put a little water in my brush, and I'm going to touch just on some of these while this is still a little bit wet to give these a little bit more depth. There we go. We got one rose. I think I'm going to stick with one on that one. I'm going to go down and I'm going to do the same thing on this one here, trying to make it even smaller. And hopefully you'll be able to set yours down. I'm trying to bring this up to the phone so we can see. And this one, I think I'm going to do 3 or maybe 3 roses down here. Maybe I'll put a couple around this, and this is going to be one that is going to go around kind of in a circle. All right, make a couple little C's. And one more. There we go. One little one there. Grab a little more magenta, and right next to it, try to make an even smaller rose. Maybe I'll leave it there. And then maybe I'll put one over here too. You can make all the decisions you want in yours to change these up a little bit. But we want to put these in a few different places on one of these if we kind of want to create one that has a few different focal points on it. So we've got some little roses. Now, if you'll see on this one, you can tell I've gone in on a second layer once it's dried and added even darker spots. So we'll go back and do that, but we want to leave those alone for a little bit to just let those dry. Next thing we want to do is mix up a little bit of some sort of green, and you can either take the colors that you have in your palette or you can adjust them. So I'm going to first start by grabbing a little bit of water, just a little bit, fresh water here. Then I'm going to grab, I believe this one is olive green, and I'm going to vary the color on these a little bit for some different types of leaves. So here's what it looks like just with that olive green. I want it a little darker. And I also think I want to add just a teeny bit of blue to this. So I'm going to grab some of this cerulean, just a little bit, maybe a little bit more. Because I want this just to have kind of a nice blue tone to it. Ooh, I like that color a lot. There we go. So, if your roses are really wet, you want to make sure you don't put anything next to it, because if you put the green right next to the rose, it's going to bleed in and it'll give kind of a funny coloration to that rose. So if you have it still wet, make sure you put these leaves where it's not going to touch them. So on this one, remember, we're going to be moving in 2 different directions. So some of the leaves will be kind of facing this way and some will be facing this way. So I think the first leaf I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a really simple leaf where I'm going to take this round brush, I'm going to touch the tip, drag while I push down, and then pull it up. There's one leaf. I'm going to do a second one that's going to attach kind of to this stem. If it doesn't have enough on the bottom part, you can do kind of a second little C shape. So we touch the tip, we push, pull, and then bring that up. And then we can kind of connect all of these into a little leaf there. You can either let those dry as they are. If you're worried about some of those backfills, or if you don't like those, you can suck up a little bit of that pigment here. We've got one leaf. I'm going to grab some more of that pigment and I'm going to do another one of those leaves over here. Maybe a little bit further away from this one here. So I'm changing the direction I'm holding the paper so that I'll be able to do these over here in this direction. And again, I'm going to touch, push, pull, and lift up. Touch, push, pull, and lift up. If you need to, grab more pigment. Let's start connecting those so we kind of know where they're at. And maybe I want a few more leaves on this one. I'm kind of making these a little bit offset. So there I've got 5 little leaves there. And I think I want another sprig of leaves that's not connected. up over here. Again, I'm going to move my paper so that I can kind of move in the direction that I want these leaves to be. And I'm going to do another 3-leaf one right here. So touch, push, pull, and up. Touch, push, pull, and up. And one more. Touch, pull, push, and up. And then let's connect those together. We're going to be building these kind of in little segments. So we're going to work on a few leaves, then we're going to either move on to another one or work on some other leaves. I'm going to throw in a couple of these leaves over here on this one too. And I'm going to put this one here. So I'm just going to do some little leaves. So I'm trying to make this one a little bit smaller. I'm using the same brush, but trying to not push as much because this is a smaller wreath. And this one, I said I wanted it all to kind of move in the same direction. So let's put one over here too. And I can do this just in a little bit smaller version here. And none of this needs to be perfect because these are, leaves and nature is imperfect, which is kind of a nice thing about doing nature type things, is you don't have to think of things as being mistakes. Maybe I'll just put one leaf there, just one. And while I'm working with this color, I think on this one over here, I'm not going to do any of the roses. I think I'll do more of just the leaves, and maybe if I want to, I'll add some of those like star flowers on there. I don't know if you guys can hear, but the birds are really chirping today. Right, so here we've got another one here, and I'm just going to make a few of these. Maybe this one will be a really long one. If you're worried about that sitting there for a while where that has that little bit extra water, you can kind of grab it and re-wet your brush using what's already on your page, and you can bring those down together. Maybe a few more here. And then I think this one I want this one to kind of come up and over here too. So I'm going to switch the direction of the leaves. And I'm going to, again, just touch, push, pull, and up. And let's just do 3 here. Take a little bit of that water out. And now I'm going to move back over to these. If you're following along and you don't want to do all the same ones I'm doing, that's totally fine. You can kind of make yours into what you want. I just try to do a few of them so I can demonstrate as many things as I can. There's a username in the chat, don't want to, can't make me. That's pretty funny. Alright, so what I want to do next is I want to put in a different type of leaf, and maybe I want one that is a little bit thicker or a little bit fatter at the bottom, where we'll actually have to do 2 brush strokes per leaf. And let's make this one a little bit brighter green. So we can either use the green that we have here and change it, or we can mix up a different color. Maybe I'll mix up a different color just so we can see it. I'm going to grab some clean water again. Just a couple drops in here. I'm going to grab some of this. This is my yellow green. And let's see what that looks like. It's a little bit too vibrant for the color I want. So I'm going to start with that. And then I think I'm going to add some of this, I believe this is red ochre. Maybe that's too much. I'm going to grab just a tiny bit of that red ochre and mix that in here. I think that's what this one is. I need to label my paints a little better. And that's a little closer to the color that I want here. for this second leaf, but maybe I want to add in a little more depth, so I'm going to grab some of this Viridian hue, which is kind of a bluish green. We want this to be a different color than what we originally had. There we go. That's the color I want. So these ones are going to be a little bit bigger, a little bit fatter at the bottom. And I'm going to place some of these where they kind of come into here, into these other ones, and so that we can kind of start to see them intertwine. So for these, what you're going to do instead of just the touch, push, pull, and up, is you're going to touch, and as you push, you're going to bring it out to the left and then out to the right until they meet. And we don't have these, you know, you can go to the right first or to the left first, whatever you feel. And I'm not actually going to connect these because I think I want this one to be kind of on a branch that would have some of the brown connectors. So I'm going to do one more leaf here. Touch and C-shape out. Touch and C-shape out to the other side, and just leave those as they are. Maybe I'll grab a little bit of that extra moisture because I am getting a little bit of this blooming here, or uneven drying, and that's okay. We can actually go back in and add some additional details that will kind of hide that, and that might actually enhance the depth that you're getting from those. Let's put some more of those leaves up here. We're kind of just building these wreaths. Think about these almost as arranging a wreath, if anybody's ever made one, where you have a whole bunch of different sprigs of things, and you kind of select where you're going to put them, and you're going to kind of distribute them throughout so that they feel balanced. So this is a little sprig of a different type of leaf than what we just had. And in general, when you're looking at sprigs with leaves on them, they're going to be a little bit bigger towards the bottom of the sprig, and they're going to get a little bit smaller as you go up. So if you want to play with that, sometimes that's nice. Oops, I forgot to turn off my Bluetooth notifications. Let's do one more here. Let's make it a little bit smaller, but still get some of that roundness at the bottom. And let's leave that one like that for now. I'm going to put a few of those in here as well. We're arranging wreaths. Yes, all of this paper is dry, so we're doing wet on dry. Pretty much all of these techniques we're going to be doing today will be a wet on dry technique. I'm going to put in one of those leaves right here, the two C shapes. I'm just going to put one there. I think I'm going to put three right here. One here, little C, little C. And we've got three there. And then this is my one that I'm mainly doing the greenery on, but I'm doing a focal point somewhere down here that's going to kind of come up into that shape. Let's start here. I'm going to start with the top part. Two little C shapes. And then let's put some up over here. If you're worried, if you don't like what this is doing while this is drying here, you can actually just go over it while it's still a little bit wet, and that will help even that out. These are just personal preferences. You know, if you like the effect of how that leaves a little extra water, then you can kind of work with it. Or if you want to correct it, you can, while it's still wet, kind of redisperse that color throughout. So I actually started with the flowers. If you're just joining, I started with the flowers, and you can do all these other things as long as the flowers are not going to touch any of this other stuff. So you can see that nothing is touching yet because I was waiting for those to dry. Okay, I'm going to make a few more. Maybe there's one that actually kind of comes in right almost into where this one is. Let's differentiate it by making sure it's got a fatter bottom there than that other leaf. Maybe one more here. Okay. Let's actually add in a few little details here so we can kind of figure out what's happening. So I'm going to wash my brush off, and then I'm going to grab whatever brown you want. I think this is some sort of an umber. I really need to label these colors. And I'm going to grab just a little bit of this brown red here. And this is pretty much this is just a damp brush. It's not super wet. You can see there's just a little bit of pigment here. And then these are the ones that I wanted to connect together with more of a tree-like branch. So I'm going to take my damp brush with this color, and I'm going to connect these so that we can kind of see where things are. I'm going to connect these ones too. So I just touch at the very base. These are all dry at this point, or well, the majority of them are dry. They're dry enough to where they're not going to, that color's not going to bleed up into them. And you don't have to be super precise. You can kind of just plop these in where you want. We're like alluding to the branch here. Just kind of making a few marks. And it's going to look, at first you're going to think, oh, is it really done? But it will all come together. All right, let's make a little bit more of kind of a viney type leaf. And when I say that, I kind of think of leaves as, like when you look at most leaves on trees, well, that's not entirely true, but there are kind of a couple different types of plants and how they grow leaves. They either grow them where they're offset, so you'll never see them right next to each other. They'll kind of go down a little bit a ways before the next one sprouts up on the other side. And then there are some plants where they always kind of meet. It's like when one sprouts to one side, the other one sprouts to the other side. So this is another way to kind of differentiate, rather than just color and size, is what type of plant it is based on if it's offset or alternating versus them being kind of all connected in those center points together. But I think of those kind of as viney ones. I don't know why, but those kind of make me think of vines. So let's make a real kind of blue-green. And I think I can actually just use this color here and just add a bunch of blue. And I want to try to find my phthalo blue, which I believe is... Where are you? That's not it. Maybe that's it. So it's a good idea. This is one of the things you can always learn is from all the mistakes that I personally make. And so it is a good idea to have a guide of where your colors are in your palette if you do a dry palette like this, and actually do a little swatch so you know what colors you have on hand and then which ones they are. I don't do that, but it would probably be pretty helpful. So I'm putting a little phthalo blue into that initial green. So I want to even just a little bit more blue. So I'm going to grab just a little bit more. and mix that in. Ooh, I like that color a lot. And let's make a few little viney leaves in here. So we want to find little pockets. It might look nice to have a sprig coming out here. It could look good to put one here, or even kind of one that's snaking up here. You can fill in some of these gaps. We can always add more flowers too if you're just feeling that. You want to find kind of holes and pockets at this point once we have some of these preset to figure out where we want to place these. So I do want to balance a little bit here and have maybe a sprig coming off here. So I'm going to do this more viney type one. And I'm going to do these as just little leaves. So this is just a size 10 round brush. I'm going to start from the top. Then I'm going to make it drop. That's a leaf. That's a leaf. I'm sorry about that. Okay. Here is just a little leaf, and I'm just using just the tip of my brush to just kind of make some little ones here. And I'm going to predefine where the stem is so that I kind of know where to go with this. For brush recommendations, I don't have really any super great recommendations other than find a round brush that you personally like. And these ones, I'm trying to make these ones real little, but just making sure that they both meet kind of in the same place on that stem. And then you can make decisions like I'm going to decide that that other leaf actually falls behind this one, so I'm not going to add it there. I'm going to put another sprig of this coming up here. Again, I think I will start by defining kind of the direction and shape of the stem here. And I can actually just place that first one right on there. I have been liking the brushes that I use. These ones are pretty good, but they're generic, and I don't actually know what brand they are. Anyways, I've been liking the Dynasty ones, as well as I do have one of those black velvet ones that I like too, but it's a little bit looser, and I don't know if I'd recommend it for beginners. It kind of depends on where you're at, because you have to already kind of know a little bit about watercolor in order to control the brush a little bit. I'm sure you can figure it out, but I like to use, I think that these ones have Taklon bristles on them, which is a synthetic fiber, and I actually really like the Taklon brushes because they have enough movement to get some of these fun effects, but they're still stable enough that they're not just kind of going everywhere. I'm going to put one here, kind of peeking out. It's going to be a little smaller one. Just a little one here. Again, thinking about this kind of like arranging, I'm going to hint to the fact that those ones are there, but I want this one to feel like it's kind of peeking out from behind those. So I'm not actually completing the leaves here. It might be a Royal Unlang nickel. It literally just says 10 on it. So, but it has a very similar brush to this one, which is this Dynasty one. And I got this one on Blick. I've had this one for a really long time, but this one is Blick. I think I just bought these ones that I'm using here from whatever local craft store. I think they were like the basic brand one. These might have even come from Hobby Lobby or Michael's, and it was whatever their store brand was, I think. Okay, we're starting to actually get some pretty good shape to this one. We're definitely going to want to add in some more details to it, but I'm starting to actually see this kind of arrangement come together. You're going to try something like this with new watercolor pens? Very cool. Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to rewatch this live, I'll be posting this to my YouTube probably later today or tomorrow. Oh, I'm glad it's helpful. I live in Colorado, and we're having a beautiful springy type morning. I'm going to add in a couple of these in here. I like to vary the color of these just because they really do, I don't know, it brings extra life to these. So let's put in a few of these here. I'm going to put one here. I'm going to define the stem on this one. Add in these leaves, making them meet in the middle. Let's put this one, I'm going to bring this one so it kind of wraps up a little bit. There's that. And then I've done a bunch of these where the shape is like this on this one, so I think on the next one I kind of want it to come out like that. Ooh, that was too thick of a mark, but that's okay. We're going to go with it. Yeah, I like that I kind of varied the shape of that a little bit, though. It was starting to feel too much like it was too uniform. My YouTube channel is Rebel Unicorn Crafts, so it's the same as my username on here, although there were spaces in it, because YouTube lets you have spaces. Let's add in a couple of these here. Maybe have one that is peeking out here. There we go. Maybe this one comes out like that. And then let's add in one more here to bring this up to kind of touch. I kind of want to leave an open space in between these. You get focused on making them all the same. Any suggestions? Are you talking about all the leaves exactly the same, or are you talking about all the wreaths? The best thing to do is, with this practice, what you're going to find is the more that you do this, the more you're going to learn to just trust your brush strokes. The less brush strokes in general in watercolor you can do, and this is something I struggle with all the time, but the less you can do, the better it's actually going to look. So if you can just place them down and accept what's going to happen to it, you're going to more than likely like the result more than if you spend a bunch of time trying to get everything absolutely perfect. Because think about leaves. So yeah, when we're making our leaves, let's just talk about this for a second. When we're making our leaves, if we just do them with 2 brush strokes, you're going to already have some variation. It's just going to happen depending on the placement. And I'm really only doing 2 to 3 brush strokes at most for most of these. And having that variation is kind of nice, because when you look at a plant, you'll notice, I mean, looking at a plant, that the leaves aren't always facing you like this. Let's pretend like this is a leaf. Sometimes they're facing a little bit like this. Sometimes they're like this. Sometimes maybe part of them has kind of flipped up. And so if you try to reduce the number of brush strokes and just trust that as long as they connect, and even if they don't look exactly the same, it's going to kind of give them the feeling of, instead of being like this, they're going to have a little variation like they normally would. Alright, before we add in any more leaves, I want to actually give some of these a little different feel. And you can see I've done this a little bit on some of these where I've actually defined the center on a few of them. And I'm going to show you a couple different tricks to kind of differentiate these two. So, This is the color that I used here for these ones that we connected with the brown. And I can just reuse that when we layer watercolor. So these are really dry for me at this point. If yours are not dry yet, you probably don't want to do this yet. But more than likely, if you did yours around the same time as me, yours should be dry enough to do this. Oh, thanks. This is it's a Sally Hansen one. I think it's called Royal Hue. You can't always find it in the drugstores, but it's on Amazon. Anyways, once a layer of watercolor is dry, if you put the same color on it, you're still going to get some differentiation because it's going to basically build pigment on the paper. And so we don't actually need to change this color to get a center stem. You absolutely can, but I'm going to just take this and I'm just going to kind of hint to center the center point of this leaf by just touching and kind of flicking up. And again, if you really try to control this, it's going to get kind of frustrating and difficult. So I like to actually just start from the base of the leaf and just flick up. And it's okay if it doesn't touch. It's okay if it does. Because again, remember, some of these might be in a slightly different position. I'm just going to do this to all of these here to give them just a little bit more depth. And this is on just this type of leaf. There we go. Put it on this one too. And that's the other really good thing about taping these down, or if you're working on a sketchbook, this will probably work too, but if you tape these down onto something you can pick up and hold, we can actually make the direction of the paper work with us. So I know that I'm better at making these shapes in this direction, so I can just move my paper around, and then my hand doesn't have to learn how to do it in different directions. It can just keep doing the same thing that it's been doing, and I just change the direction. Put it on this one too. Ooh, that one was a little bit more than I meant. I feel like that really does change that all the way. Change it quite a bit. All right, now another way to make your leaves a little bit more differentiated is we have this color here, which is these ones. I probably won't add any details to this real blue-green one, but the other thing we can do is, let's say I'm going to grab some of this and I'm going to grab some of this. So we've got our leaf here, and if we let that dry as it is, we've already seen kind of what that looks like. But one thing you can do to differentiate the leaves is go in and do a second layer with just one of those C's. And so it's going to give it a little bit of kind of two sides of that leaf. And yes, I am going to be uploading this live later today or tomorrow to my YouTube channel, which is Rebel Unicorn Crafts. So all I'm going to do is, and these are the very first leaves that I painted on here. These are the ones that I want to cover just one half of the leaf with. And we're going to do that on here with a, well, I don't know if this is the color I want. You can either do it with the same color, you can do it with a darker color. This one I think might be a little bit too vibrant to put on top of this, because that would be the color. That's a little bit too much for me. So I'm going to grab a little bit more of this blue to mix in. There we go. That might be nice. And all I'm going to do is just try to go down one side of these. And it's nice to keep them all on the same side of the leaf if we're going to do this. But it does definitely give some depth. It kind of makes it seem like the leaf is either kind of rounded or concaved. And I think that really helps a lot there. It also gives, even though all these leaf shapes are very similar, it starts to give very different feelings to all of these leaves so that they're even more differentiated than just by color. On these littler ones, it's a little harder, but I'm going to still make an attempt. There we go. Oh, there's one here too. How do we paint the roses? So I'm actually thinking I will probably add a rose to this one here. We'll do it again, and then I'll also show you how to do the second layer of the roses. So we'll start with that in just a minute. So if you missed the roses, in just a minute is when you're going to want to pay attention again. My brush isn't super sopping while I'm doing this. It's kind of damp with the paint. Alright, let's actually start with the rose here. I'm going to wash my brush because I've got green in it and I don't want that to be in my pretty pink color. First thing when you're painting the rose is make sure whatever it is dry around it, especially when you've got green around it, because that is going to, if it runs in there, it'll really muddy the color, so you want to start with a dry area. And I'm taking a brush. I'm using, this is quinacridone magenta, and I'm just going to, I have watered this down a little bit. So here's what it is. It's still pretty bright, but it's definitely a little watered down. And we don't want our brush to be super duper wet because we want to, on these first ones, I'm just going to demonstrate on this really quick. But on these first ones, we're going to be making little C shapes on the inside. And if our brush is really wet, we can't really make little shapes. So I'm actually going to dry my brush off just a little bit. And I'm going to make the little C shapes, and they're going to kind of just get a little bigger, a little bit thicker, and they overlap a little bit as we move out. They're very simple. The three colors, okay, so on my palette here, this is a magenta, quinacridone magenta. I have a little bit of red here, and then these are two different greens that I have kind of mixed up with a variety of olive green, some yellow green in this one, and then I think I put a little bit of this color into this one as well. And then this one was phthalo blue, viridian, and olive green, I think. I'm actually kind of forgotten what they are at this point, but I just like to mix up three different greens or a few different greens in order to give them all a little different feeling. All right, let's add a rose to this. So another good reason to have tester strips in addition to testing your colors is you can also kind of test how much water is going to come out when you move your brush. So you might want to make sure that it's fairly dry for this. You don't want dry brush, but you want damp brush, not wet brush. All right, so I'm going to put a rose right here. I might put more than one. I'm just going to kind of see what I feel like. But for the very center, we just make a little C shape. And then we come over to one side of it and we make a C shape that kind of curves into that one. And then a slightly bigger one. You want these to overlap and get a little bigger. And then while this is still wet here, we can actually take a little bit more of this pigment, or we could even get a little bit crazier and go straight into one of our dry pigments here, and you can touch along the edges to give it a little bit of that like pretty bleeding effect. on some of these. I'm going to grab this magenta again. I'm going to make a second little rosebud right over here. Little C shapes. And the more white space you can preserve, the more they'll look like roses. Maybe let's put one little tiny one here. Or actually, let's turn this one into a little bud. So I'm just going to kind of make it into this little shape here, which is kind of like a little teardrop shape, kind of similar to the leaves. We will add some extra details to the bottom of that once that does dry to kind of make it seem like it's a rose that's about to open up. Okay, those roses I'm not super duper crazy about, but it's okay. It's all right. We've done a few paintings, and sometimes you win some, sometimes you lose some. Let's go back to these roses, though, because in general I like these, but I think they could have a little more depth, and so I want to actually add kind of a second highlight layer to these. So I'm actually going to take, I think this is Crimson Lake here, and I'm going to mix it in the top part of this magenta color, and it's going to darken that just a little bit. And I'm going to just make some extra little marks to make sure that we're getting some kind of shadowed areas. Again, preserving white space in these is key, but if we make a few more of these little marks and we keep this brush really pretty dry while we do this, it will help to emphasize the shapes of this while also giving it a little more depth. In general, you want the center part to be darker, so if you want to darken yours even more, you can add in even more into the center and kind of concentrate it there, and that will help. I'm just going to put them just in the center on this one. So this is a almost dry brush filled with very concentrated pigment on these dry flowers. I'm just adding a second layer to give them the feeling that they're really thick and they've got a lot of pockets. But preserving that white space is going to help. Oh, yes, roses, thank you. So if you missed this, it's okay, because I will be posting this again to my YouTube channel. So if you still want to follow along, you totally can. I'm going to show you something that I know I really struggled with when I first started as far as the roses. And that was where I keep talking about preserving white space and making sure there are gaps in between where I put those C's. And I'm just going to show you the difference between when you do that and when you don't. So if I were to do a rose here, and I made some little of those C shapes, kind of like what I've been doing, maybe even make it a little bit lighter as I go out with a little bit more water. This is not going to be my best rose, but you're going to hopefully get the idea. Now let's do this again, but let's not preserve that white space. So if I just made a C, and then I kept having these run together, they end up not really looking like roses. Now you can save this. And this to me is the hardest skill in watercolor, is learning how to not put pigment on paper, basically making sure there are areas that it doesn't exist. And it's hard because, well, you're painting and you want to cover it all, but it does keep the magic alive when you can. So if you did this and you were at this point where it was still wet, one thing you can do is wash your brush and then dry it so it's pretty much damp, and then you can try to suck up some of that pigmentation in a few areas to give it a little variation. The other thing you can do is wait until this dries and then do that second layer that we did on top of it, making sure that you leave a bunch of room in between those strokes so that you're at least getting the depth from that. So yeah, that's not the best rose, but I feel like in general, when you look at this, you get the feeling of a rose more than when you do look at this. And that's just because I have left some of those open areas, which kind of gives, you know, one of the beautiful things about roses is when they open and they have so much space between the petals to allow light in, as well as to allow shadows and things like that, and variation. All right, let's add some other fun details to these. I feel like having some little star flowers on some of these. Of course. Yeah, if you've got questions, feel free to ask too. I'm always happy to answer questions during lives. So down here, I've got just some extra mixing space, and I just want to do some of these little star flowers that are kind of seen here. We're basically going to be making the same leaf shape, but turning it into a petal and making it kind of in a star shape. So the yellows that I usually like to use for these are kind of more golden. So let's start with, this is Permanent Yellow Deep. I had to refresh that a little bit. And this is a nice color. That would look good there, but I like to tone it down usually just a little bit by grabbing some yellow ochre. And I personally like that color more. You can make your yellow whatever you want. Just put a little more water on there. And I kind of want to start filling some of these areas just with some extra little details where I feel like they need some help. So I did draw the circle first, and I drew it really lightly, and I removed almost all of the graphite using an eraser before I started. And it's just as a guide so that I kind of know what direction these should be. So there's definitely a gap here where I want to put a little star flower. So this is where we're going to just touch. And again, this is a great way to make sure that you can actually do this, is just turn your paper. And I want to leave a little space in the center. Once this dries, I'm going to put a little red dot in the center there. So now I've got a little star flower there. I feel like it would be good to put one here. So let's start from the right here. We're basically making the same shapes over and over and over again in these. We're just varying placement, color, size. And again, if you were to put your leaf or your petal here over this, you're not going to be able to, it's going to be more green. So usually what I would do in this case is I just hint to the fact that maybe it's behind there. So I'll bring it so that it just kind of make a drop that touches just barely. And these leaves are dry for me at this point. I want to put another one. I actually think I want to put another one over here. Maybe try to make it a little bit smaller. Again, I'm trying to preserve that white space in between all those in the very center. And I'm making 5. Just think about kind of a star pattern with these. Maybe there's a little one up here too. You can put yours wherever you want. I think there could even be one right here. It is okay if they're not perfect. It's nature. I don't know if I want to add them onto this one. I might add something a little different on this one, so I'm going to leave that one as it is for now. I am going to put it over here, put some over here. I think this one could use some help. Especially, this one is, it's a little bottom heavy over here, so I need to actually add a little more bottom to over here to balance it. What kind of board? So this is actually some MDF board here. So this one's pretty hard. But this is when I finished a bit of paper. This is just the back cardboard of it. You can also use like a box, a cardboard box, anything you have that is fairly sturdy. I don't know what your placemat is like. If it's kind of a plasticky one, it will probably work pretty good. If it's fabric, it might not. But this one does have some bend to it. This one doesn't have any bend to it. But they both work just fine. All right, I'm adding more star flowers. I want to add a little bit, one here. One here. Let's put one over here too. And again, if you didn't join at the beginning of this, so there are two different ways to make a wreath. You can either make a wreath that has kind of a focal point where the leaves go up in opposite directions towards kind of the center on the opposite side of your focal point. And so you'll see that the direction of these leaves move this way and this way. Or you can do it where they all kind of move in the same direction around the circle. And either one is totally fine. You can also do whatever you want to, but in general, I do find that you want to pick one of those two and kind of stick to it, because at this point, if I added some leaves going in the opposite direction over here, it would end up looking a little bit funny. Like, oh, what happened there? So, can you do one tilted? What do you mean by that? Are you talking about where one side it has more, one side has less, or are you talking about the actual placement of the board? I do not use an easel while painting with watercolor. I only do that with my acrylic painting. Watercolor, I always just, this is my table here, and then I just put this on here, and I keep this so that it is tilted. Sideways the flower. Oh. Yeah, we can do, I mean, yes. So if we were doing a star flower, let's think about this for a second. So we've been making our flowers like this in general, not exactly like that, but, and again, that's kind of talking about the placement. And I think what you're asking about is if you were looking at one that was on the side. So a flower like that, it would probably look kind of like that, and then we maybe put like a little bit of green down there. So that would be a good way to kind of tilt this. Let's try to add a tilted star flower. So this one, let's make this one kind of coming up over here, and this one is coming from the side, a side view. And we'll make those little petals. And actually, it's basically the same thing, except for we do want them to touch. And we're just going to do the 3, and then you might want to hint to the fact that there isn't kind of another one coming up from the other side. The wreath opens on the side instead of at the top. Yeah, absolutely. Yours can be open wherever you want. Gouache compared to watercolor. I have done a little bit of painting with gouache, but I'm not very experienced with it, so I'm probably not the best person to ask that. I mainly do acrylic and watercolor. Alright, I want to add a few more details into these. So the first thing we want to do is, let's just look at some of our samples and see if I can get a little more inspiration. So the first thing is, I see here, I need to add some actual leaves to my roses. They're looking pretty bare, and you wouldn't just have a bud, you would actually have some foliage with it. So let's mix up a color that we want to be for our leaves. I want this to be, I'm going to start with this kind of brighter green color here, but I want this one to be a little bit more muted than the other ones. Just to kind of have a nice contrast between that bright pink color. You can make yours whatever color you want, but I'm grabbing some of this. This is some of that red ochre, and just mixing that in. And then I'm going to grab just a teeny bit of, I think this is the phthalo blue. I might have a little bit too much in there, so let's just dab my brush off. That's a nice color, but I think I want a little bit more greeny in it. There we go. I like that color. So rose leaves, or petals, no, leaves, yes, leaves. For a second I lost track of what petals were, and leaves were. Depending on the rose, they have slightly different leaves. Now, they're usually kind of spiky, so you would do kind of a 2C shape, and then I usually will add in the little spikes on the side of them. You can either do those, or you can just kind of add in some leaves. If you're kind of like trying to fit in some leaves, just add in some leaf shapes. How do you know when to stop adding stuff in? That is a hard question, and one that most artists really struggle with. And so the best advice I have for this is, when you start to feel like it's balanced, like this one I feel like I need to add a little bit more to, but I don't want to add too much more, so I don't want it to become too complicated, is to just set it down, walk away, maybe grab a glass of water, come back. If it still says to you, I need more, then add something more to it. If you walk back and you still feel like, I think that might be enough, then just stop adding. Right. Okay. Let's add in these leaves. So we've got a few different things that are going on our roses. For example, over here, we're going to add a little bud. Okay, so I'm going to, again, change the position of this. Let's have this kind of coming off of the rose a little bit. And I am going to try to kind of make those serrated edges that those sometimes have. I'm also trying to, on some of these, kind of touch up to the bottom so that it looks like the leaf is partially obscured. And I'm just adding these kind of where I feel like there's either dead space that needs something, or you can also do this in a way where you can kind of encourage the eye to look at a certain part of this. For example, this won't work here because of where that flower is, but if I really wanted the focal point to kind of be drawn into the center here, if I put a leaf that kind of pointed almost in the direction of looking into the center, you can do that. I'm just going to keep adding some fluffy leaves there. Maybe one more. Maybe right in here. And that's kind of a funny shape there. There we go, that's a little better. Let's add some of those to these ones too. So if you have missed most of the class, it's alright, because I will be posting this onto YouTube. So if you want to rewatch the beginning or any part of this, then you'll be able to do it. I'm just going to kind of connect these together with some of the leaf foliage. And you'll see I'm not being super precise because Sometimes, especially with watercolor, your mind likes to kind of fill in gaps. And so if you kind of treat these a little bit more abstracted, your brain is going to do a lot of the work for you. And if you try to over perfect them, I mean, sometimes you can get really beautiful results, but sometimes if you over perfect them a little bit too much, then your brain is trying to kind of figure out, well, hold on a second, what is happening here? And it tries to kind of like find the mistakes of them. So if you're struggling with this, try to go a little bit looser, and let your brain do some of the work of filling in the gaps of what is happening there. Because your brain will want to kind of make it pretty, and it's kind of like a fun little brain puzzle for it. Okay, we've got a few different leaves on our roses there. Let's add them to this one too. Do I do anything special to the paper before paint? I heard someone talk about stretching. I personally don't. In general, I'm a really impatient person, so stretching to me is just one extra step that I don't want in between me and painting. It can help, especially if you're using a thinner paper, to pre-wet and stretch it. And if you are a more methodical person, that might be a really good option for you. It's just, I personally would paint less, and so I don't. All right, I am going to make this into a little bud here. And I'm going to do that by just touching at the bottom with some of this green to kind of hint to the part that encapsulates this. I'm going to give it a little stem. And then these usually have some kind of little bits that come off in a few different directions there. And I'm just trying to be real haphazardly intentional about some of those placements, so I'm not overworking it too much. I think these roses are going to need a second layer of paint to make them pop a little bit more, but I want to wait at this point because I want everything to be dry over here before I do that. Okay, let's look at some of these and see what we want to do. The first thing I want to do is I want to add in my little red dots in the center here, and I think I want these to be, I'm going to start with this red ochre, and then I'm going to add some of this crimson lake. Let's test over here. Add some more of that crimson lake. Maybe I even want to add a little bit of orange. So how long have I been painting is one of the questions. And, you know, for a while I was saying just a few years, but I actually made a video this morning talking about the fact that my dog was one of the big impetuses for me to actually start painting, and I've had her for almost 8 years now, so I guess about 8 years. Alright, so I'm taking this kind of reddish, rusty orange color, and I'm just going to put a little dot in the center of all of these to give them kind of their internal stamen. I like that a lot. That definitely helps. There. There. And then this one is the one that's on the side, so we probably would maybe only get like a teeny tiny glimpse of it. Alright, let's do a little more balancing here. So I think I could do some more of these where they kind of weave in and out, which is this color over here. Feel free to stop your wreaths at any time. I'm going to keep working until I kind of feel like some of these feel like they're done. I really think I only need to add in maybe one more thing here or here before I will find this one done. I'm using a round brush. This is a size 10 round brush that has Taklon bristles, I believe. I don't actually know because the packaging doesn't say that, but that's what I suspect. And this is just a generic craft store brand round brush. Alright, so I'm going to add some more of these leaves over here. And these are our C-shape ones. So we start with just the tip, and we make a C to the left, and then a C to the right. At this point, I'm just kind of filling in some gaps where I think that I need a little bit more. I could probably even just put one more leaf here. And as long as I then add in some of that brownish color to those, it'll help differentiate it between that. And I think that will be actually pretty good there. This one can definitely use a little bit more. This one was, I think, a little bit too small. I like this one a little better. Again, that's one of the things I like to do is paint a few paintings at a time. One, because, again, as I've kind of said, I'm pretty impatient. And it allows me to work on a few things so I don't have to stop painting and wait for things to dry. But the other part is, you know, it kind of protects me against failure to a degree, because if I don't like one, I can just, you know, take a look at the other ones and think, oh, well, I like that one, so no big deal. I want to balance this one a little bit more over here, so I'm going to add in a few of those here. And maybe one over here, just a hint to it. Now, the good news here too is that I think that this area right here is dry enough for me to add another layer on these roses. So all I'm going to do is take some of this magenta, and again, we want to make sure our brush is not too overfilled for this, because we want to be able to make really small marks. So maybe tap off a little bit of that pigment so you can make really small marks with this. Question is, when and why did I start painting? I'll get to that in just a second, because all I'm going to do is just make these little marks in here. I'm just trying to add in some layers of color, maybe go straight into some more heavier pigment, and concentrate that around kind of the center. And I think I'm actually even going to hint to the fact that usually on those buds, you can kind of see the definition between where the leaves wrap around them. So I've always been really interested in art, and I used to draw a lot, and I started mainly with jewelry and drawing, and then I would try to paint, and it was a big struggle for me. I didn't understand something about color really was difficult for me. Even some of my initial paintings were just black and white, where I just did different values. And then one day, I don't know what it was. It was like color started to make sense in how you would actually put color down on the page. And from there, I couldn't kind of stop painting. But I like to paint because, one, I just have like a drive to do it. Two, it's this really relaxing activity. I think art, for people who have any sort of a creative drive, doesn't matter how good you are at art, but I think it's really important to people's mental state, especially now where everything we do is digital and then it just flies away and we never see it again. Having something like physical, there's this just, you gotta like switch your brain off a little bit while you're doing this, and then at the very end you have this tangible thing, and it kind of fulfills that reward center in your brain rather than feeling like you worked on something and now it's just gone. So I really like tangible things, and I really got more into painting when I was still in the corporate world, and I needed to come home and have something tangible. You hear from the metallic paint boxing video? So I actually was going to, I think we've got maybe I have a few minutes if we want to add some little metallic pieces to these I want to finish these here. I need to make the center pieces for these ones I added on, so just going to kind of make the center parts of these. Yeah, watercolor definitely. I started with acrylic paint. Ooh, we've got the kids next door have a trampoline. So if you hear any noises, that's what's happening because I got my window open and they're having lots of fun. I want a trampoline. Anyways, I'm adding some of those center stems to the ones that I added on here, and then I'm also going to grab just a little bit of this kind of brownish color, maybe some of that umber, and I'm going to just hint to where these kind of twigs intertwine in some of these things. Sometimes even just adding a few of those into here kind of helps balance things a little bit. All right, so we've got, I think I'm actually kind of done with these three here, although I do have the metallic watercolors over here, and I've got a few more minutes that I can spend on this, so let's add a little bit to maybe this one here, because this one is, I really like my top one here. The bottom one is nice, but I don't know. It's also really small. And this one I like, but I feel like it's missing a little something. So let's add some sparkle to it and see. So again, if you haven't seen this video, I bought this set of their Paul Rubens, which I didn't know this, and I got a lot of funny comments about this, but apparently that's Pee Wee Herman's real name. I do not think these are made by Pee Wee Herman. I cannot confirm that. I did do quite a bit of Googling on it, but from what I can see, he's not responsible for these, which would make sense. But I did find a lot of resources, or a lot of pictures of people who have done watercolor paintings of Pee Wee Herman. Anyways, here is the set, and it's just beautiful. I think these cost me about $45. And I think they're pretty well priced. I mean, they are a little bit pricey, but these will last me forever. So here are all the metallic colors. Do I sell? So I do sell some of my paintings. I've got some listed on my website, or I've got an Etsy, and I even have a space at a local gallery. But for the most part, my house is just piles of paintings, especially these, because I don't want to let some of these go. Like some of these I would maybe fit into something, but when I do these samples, I keep a pile of them so that when I go to do new classes, I can give people examples and show them kind of what we're going to be doing. So I think this was about $45. So I'm just going to wet some of the green and gold colors. And, yeah. Metallic watercolors take a minute. You really do need to make sure that they're more wetted so that it actually picks up quite a bit of that, the metallic part of it. I'm going to move this to the side. And let's just get in here with these. Let's wash our brush really well. And ooh, I don't know, maybe I also want to wet a little bit of that pink here, because I might want to put some of that on my rose. Let's see what happens when I add just some of these greens to the one side of these to see if it helps kind of differentiate. And I do find with metallic watercolors that you have to let this sit and really kind of like turn this more into a paste if you want to get a good concentration of the shiny stuff in it. Well, thank you guys. You guys are very nice. Anyways, you want to make sure it's almost more like a paste. If you just kind of grabbed it, you won't get much and you won't see much effect. Let's figure out what color we want to use. So here is That's the darker one. I kind of maybe want a brighter one. Let's try this one. So here's one of my favorite parts, and it hasn't started it yet, but one of my favorite parts of metallic, oh, I like that, that's pretty, of metallic watercolor is once you wash your brush enough times in your water, it starts to be really sparkly and shiny, and I will usually sit after I do metallic watercolors and just look at the paint, my water swirl around for quite some time. Alright, so I like this color better, this lighter one. Let's add this to the sides of some of these. Oh, you are very welcome. As a quick reminder, if you feel like sharing, I love it when people send me pictures, and the best way to do that is through Instagram, either at Lacey Walker Art or at Rebel Unicorn Crafts. I have 2 Instagram accounts. The Lacey Walker Art one is more quote-unquote fine art. I'm not a huge fan of that term, but it's kind of falls a little bit more into that category, and the Rebel Unicorn Crafts is more of my experimental stuff or testing things. Oh yeah, that's fun. I don't know if you can see the shine of that. I can see it really well here. I don't know if I'm getting it picked up there. Now I just want to add, I'm just going to add it to this one too. Now that I have it out. Let's add it to this one too. And in general, from what I understand about metallic watercolor, is it should be the last thing you add on. It doesn't really sit or layer very well, so it's kind of like the finishing touch, the sprinkle of salt at the very end. Ooh, that's pretty. And let's put a little bit of that pink onto the rose too. Ooh, my stomach is telling me it is lunchtime. All right, grabbing some of that pink, and this will help hopefully highlight some of the kind of the lips of the petals. There we go. Yeah, so I did exactly. I made the one side darker on the ones that I added the metallic to. So the one side was the darker side, and then I decided to add it to the lighter side. You could add it to either side. I was just thinking that it would make more contrast, that's the word I'm looking for, between the two sides. You just had your evening meal? All right, well, I think that wraps it up for today. Thank you all for joining me. These are every Saturday. I'll put this here. I did get water on it, but if you do want to send me pictures, Lacey Walker Art or Rebel Unicorn Crafts. I always love seeing what you guys make. Yeah, and it's kind of fun to connect with you guys more where you can talk a little bit more too. How many watercolor sets have I gone through? Not very many, actually. Watercolor lasts a really long time, so it is it's a really nice medium, especially if you're on a budget, because you really only need to buy one. Like, I recently refilled these with my tube pans, my tube paint, and it's the first time I've had to refill them since I've had them, and I've had these like 4 or 5 years, so, and I paint constantly, so most people would probably paint at most half as much as I paint, but even if you do paint as much as I do, they'll last you a really, really long time. So every Saturday is 11 a.m. Mountain Time, which I believe is 10 a.m. Pacific and 1 p.m. Eastern Time. I'm not sure what time it is in other time zones than that, yeah, if you need to, there are good time zone calculators that I have to use all the time. But yeah, that's when it is every Saturday. I usually hop on a few times during the week if I have extra time to just share what I'm working on or whatnot. And anytime I'm on, feel free to ask me any questions you have about watercolor, or if you've got requests for classes or things you want me to make videos on. I'm always thankful for those suggestions, and I'm going to be working on some of those this weekend. Next week, I don't know. If you guys have suggestions, I was maybe going to bring out. So today's class, we had the decision, and it ended up being a lot closer than initially, but the two decisions were between the floral wreaths and crystals. These are kind of fun to paint too. These would be fun to do some metallic on as well. But I might do this. I don't know. Depends on what you guys want. We've also done some classes on color mixing. We've done classes where we do more abstract, which the abstracts are kind of fun because you get to actually practice some of the techniques without having to feel like, oh no, I didn't paint a perfect rose or whatever it is. We can also do classes that focus on specific skills like lifting, where we could do a bunch of cloudy type things. Birds, okay. So one thing I'm trying to figure out, and this I probably won't do birds yet. Now, don't lose hope, because I would like to do some animals, but I need to get my stuff together a little bit more, because if we do an animal, I would like to provide you guys a reference photo that you can kind of trace on so that you have a good start to it. So that, because I'm not a very good drawing instructor, so I don't want to have to leave you guys hanging where you're trying to figure out how to draw something. So if we do an animal, and hopefully I'm really busy with a bunch of stuff currently, but if we do an animal, it'll take me a couple weeks preparation, because I want to make sure that I can put it on my website so you can download it to the right size and all that kind of stuff. Watercolor tubes, they can dry out, but if you open them up using some really good shears, you can re-wet it, and then you can put it into a pan. But in general, no. I have watercolor tubes. Well, my watercolor tubes, yeah, I've got some that are pretty old. The only ones that dry out are the ones that I didn't put on. Fingernails are, I think this is Sally Hansen, and I believe it's called Royal Hue. It's my favorite color, and it is, I get complimented on this more than anything I've ever been complimented in my life. So if you feel like having compliments, you should get this nail polish too. Yeah, it's I do like this color quite a bit. All right, thank you so much. I'm going to head off and eat some lunch, and I hope to see you guys next time.